Give it time. I know that I'm not easy. This cold heart of mine, she really took a beating before you stuck through blizzards.
Hello my lovelies and welcome to today's video. I am going to be talking about all the books that I read in December. We've got a lot of blended reading, some purely audios, a couple of physical books, so let's just get started. The first book I finished off in December was one that I had borrowed from the library on and off for quite a while. I even think I did a reading vlog on it, and that is Practical Magic by Alice Hoffman. I also had the audiobook that I was listening to alongside reading it, which was great. This is a heartwarming and captivating tale of sisterhood between the Owens sisters. It's also about love and the power of magic. Honestly, reading this story was such a whimsical dream. I loved growing up beside Sally and Gillian in their odd magical little lives. It was a quiet generational saga for the most part, but there was some excellent plot development, and I just loved the strong matriarch of the generations as they went, particularly the aunts. I was so fond of them, which is crazy to say because when you think about it, there's not really a lot of detail of them on the page, but whenever they popped up or were mentioned, I was just like, I just had such fond feelings for. The whole vibe of this story was very whimsical and easy with some, you know, light drama. It wasn't that light all the time, but it just felt like a breath of fresh air. I absolutely adored it, and I gave it a 5 out of 5 stars. Following that, unfortunately, I had a DNF for December, and that was Ring the Hill by Tom Cox. This one is a non-fiction exploring the natural world and of nature, history and personal experience and development. I had once tried another Tom Cox book before, which was a collection of short stories, and it was called Save the Witch or something like that, or Help the Witch, sorry. Unsuccessfully. I think I gave that a 1 star. There was a couple of stories that I think about even now, but I didn't really enjoy it. But I thought, well, let me try something else, and I thought maybe the non-fiction side could be something that I enjoy because I like nature. But I felt like for me this was a little bit too connected with his personal life, and I don't know him or care to know his history like that. That sounds really bad, but I don't have an investment in him already as a person, so I think because it was quite heavy on his personal stories, I just didn't really care for it, unfortunately. It's not to say it wasn't written well or there wasn't some funny humours or some interesting anecdotes for the portions that I read. It just wasn't for me, unfortunately. Something that was for me, another non-fiction, and this was The Woman in Me by Britney Spears. I think this was my Audible book for the month, and I gave this one a 4 out of 5 stars. It's an inspiring story of resilience and empowerment from Britney herself. So it was quite a sad story, as a lot of you would probably understand if you was aware of the whole Free Britney movement, all of the conservatorship, all of that sort of stuff. But it was really interesting to kind of see it from her perspective and what she was thinking and feeling going through all these different stages of life. We follow from the early stages where she's kind of just set up within the entertainment industry. She's on, is it Barney and Friends, with Demi Lovato and quite a lot of the OG Disney kids, and kind of goes quiet for a while, and then she gets back into stardom, and that's where she really kicks off her Britney Spears singer personality. And then of course we've got the conservatorship and just where she's at now. It does end where she's still married, so that was it was interesting to see where she was then. She seemed so happy, but on reflection it's so sad because obviously that ended shortly after the book and everything was announced, I think. So yeah, it was just an eye-opener really, and it gave me more information about Britney Spears than you would get from just, you know, all the publicity and all the kind of he said, she said. So also the lasting effects of certain relationships and how they've kind of carried through to her life and affected her, and yeah, it was quite a heartbreaking biography. After that I read a horror, and this is The Girl from the Well by Ringe Peko. This one I gave a 3.5 out of 5 stars. So this is inspired by Japanese folklore. We're following Akiku, who has wandered the world for centuries, freeing the spirits of the murdered dead. Then she meets Tak, who has an evil beneath the surface, and decides to see what that's all about. It kind of reminded me of Anna Dressed in Blood, this kind of ghost story where there's more to the ghost than everyone kind of initially expected. Quite a sad, harrowing backstory, and really good character development. There were some really scary scenes as well that was definitely amplified by me listening to it alone at night in the dark, which was great. It really added that ambience, that atmosphere. It was super creepy. But yeah, I pretty much, after one book, I went almost instantly into the next one. So the book I had in between was The Tempest by William Shakespeare, and this one, unfortunately, I gave a 1 out of 5 stars. Please don't hate me, all of you that can appreciate the beauty and the themes of this. I just am not one of those people. It is an enchanting story of betrayal, magic and redemption, following exiled Prospero and his daughter Miranda. So I found this to be obviously like a really challenging read. A lot of it definitely went way over my head, especially because like this is something, the sort of content I never studied in school. We didn't do, I don't think we ever did any Shakespeare, to be honest, in my units that I was doing. This was like whoa, like 15 years ago, I don't know, it was a good time ago now, and we didn't study it like that. So I think coming into it with fresh eyes and not kind of having that understanding of what to look for in themes and that sort of breaking apart of some of these works, I just didn't get it. As well as that, the old language kind of threw me off because I was like, I don't know what anyone's saying. At the time, I didn't realise that The Island of Dr. Moreau is based on this, and that's a book that's been on my TBR for a while, especially because I have the... what's the more recent one about the young lady who's the daughter of Dr. Moreau? I've got that on my TBR as well. And basically, yeah, it's something that I think I would probably appreciate more with a more modern retelling, even though that's still technically a modern classic, I think, but in a more updated way I might understand the themes a little bit better. So I do have that in mind. Potentially we'll get to that this year. I did hope I would have better luck with the movie as well, but I have since watched that, and I will talk about that in a video later on in this month, where I talk about all the movies I watched in the last quarter of 2023. And then we went back to the second and final book in the duology of The Girl from the World. This is The Suffering, again by Rinji Peko, and I gave this one a 3 out of 5 stars, so it dropped just a half star. This is obviously the sequel, continuing on the dark supernatural story of Okiku and Tark. It was so good to see Tark a few years on. We do have a time jump, and usually that's something that kind of irritates me, but I think it mainly irritates me when it's within a book, but because we come back to the next book and he's a bit older, it doesn't hit as hard. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's not as painful because, I don't know, it wasn't in something that you're already invested in, that one story, and then all of a sudden it's a time jump. I don't know if I'm explaining that well. Anyway, it was also really interesting to see how he dealt with the darkness that was inside of him and all the stuff that unravelled, of course, from the first book. I enjoyed even more exploration in Japan and the ghost adventures there, and it just felt like a big, like, creepypasta storytelling, and I adored it. It was really good fun, but there was just something that was a little bit not quite there for me. I don't know if it was the focus maybe being less on Okiku, even though you still very much have her story. I really connected with her, and I think we had less of her presence, I guess, and maybe that was kind of why my rating was a little bit dim. Next up, I listened to another horror, and this is Wise Creatures by Deirdre Sullivan, and I gave this one a 4 out of 5 stars. No, let me correct myself, a 4.5 out of 5 stars. This is a slow burning atmospheric horror story that delves into the complexities of family and paranormal. Daisy was a child psychic and hasn't thought about that traumatizing period of her life in quite some time, until her cousin, who she's living with, Nina, begins to become haunted. I don't know if that last part made sense. Begins to be haunted. It's interesting because it says the haunting always starts with a person rather than you think of like a haunted house, and that was just, I don't know, that whole concept just kind of was a mind-blowing moment for me. I don't know why. This was such a hard read, honestly, due to the raw topics of abuse in many forms. I wasn't expecting the level of depth that we got in some of the themes that was explored within this story. You know, I went in kind of thinking it was just going to be this atmospheric horror about a person being haunted, maybe focusing a bit on mental health, and we had that, but there was so much more to it. And yeah, there were some really difficult topics, but it was used, I think, really well to express the way these characters were and what they'd been through, and just it was fantastic, I think. Some of Nina and Daisy's choices did kind of irritate me. I think I might just be aging out of this YA kind of vibe, so sometimes being back in the head of like teenagers, just I don't relate, do you know what I mean? But that's just overall, I would say this was definitely a chilling and powerful story with more depth than I was expecting. Would definitely recommend it. Obviously check your trigger warnings. Then I listened to The Society of Soulless Girls by Laura Stephen. The month prior I had read Every Exquisite Thing, which I absolutely adored, so I wanted to go back to her first book of these kind of dark gothic retellings, and this one I gave a 4 out of 5 stars, so I did really enjoy it. It is a sapphic dark retelling of the gothic classic of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, but we're following Lottie as she must uncover the truth of the North Tower deaths at her school before they strike again. This was such a good story. Actually made me appreciate the original even more, because I remember when I read it I gave it like a 3 stars. I enjoyed it, but I didn't see like all the big hype. I definitely understood like the themes of what it was expressing for its time, like mental health and everything like that. I just don't think it was handled the best way. I'm pretty sure I've done a review where I talked about some classics altogether. Like if I can find it, I'll link it for you. But this story, this kind of modern interpretation of it really made me think back on the original story with a more appreciative eye. Again, some of the conversations felt a little bit too juvenile for me to relate to, but once I connected to the characters a bit more, it didn't faze me as much. The depictions of anger and the loss of control was really interesting. I think a lot of people probably grow up not knowing how to regulate their emotions just from generational like trauma being passed down and not being spoken about or taught about properly or effectively. So that was really interesting to kind of read in that perspective and be like, yeah, I get that, you know. Second to last is a book that I've done a full in-depth review. I've got a spoiler-free section followed by a spoiler discussion, and that is for The Lost War by Justin Lee Anderson, and I gave this a 5 out of 5 stars. If you would like to hear my thoughts about the matter, then please check out that video. The last book I read for December was The Tiger and the Wolf by Adrian Tavosky, and that was my first book by him that I've actually listened to / read. This is the first book in the Echoes of the Fall series, and we're following Manya sets out into the world on her own to find her true self away from the demands of the Wolf clan and her chieftain father. This was full of so much action and emotion, and I absolutely enjoyed the descriptions of tribal spirit animals being even more magical than they already seem, you know, like they actually stepped into these animals. But our main character Manya has 2 spirits within her. She has the spirit of the tiger and the spirit of the wolf, and she has to choose one. It was a great story. There was some parts where it dragged a little bit. I think it was just a lot of info dumping in some portions, but other than that, you know, it was a solid read, I feel. I gave that one a 3.5 out of 5 stars, and that is it for today's video. Thank you so much for watching. Do let me know what you were reading in December and maybe what you're reading for January. Happy New Year, and I shall speak to you in another video soon. Bye!